For 50 years, from about the 1940s through to the late 1980s, Triabunna was a major boat building centre in Tasmania, mainly of fishing boats, but also yachts. The dry climate of the east coast allowed for building boats out in the open. Boat builders included Neil Drake and Michael Drake, Jim and Dave Jones, Malcolm Ferguson, John Castle, and Dean and Bernard Wilson. And Bernard Wilson has become a legend in his own lifetime. I interviewed him about 10 years ago for the crayfishing DVD, Crayfishing Around Tasmania. I had a chat with him again a few weeks ago about boats he'd built. Anyway, we'll start off with a little bit I did on the boat building 10 years ago.
For nigh on 200 years, timber fishing boats were built anywhere and everywhere. They were built in shipyards and backyards, in paddocks and sheds, and by rivers and creeks. They were built by experts and amateurs, by sawmillers and farmers. There were fishermen who built boats.
I think I built about 14 down there altogether.
There were boat builders who went fishing.
I always wanted to go fishing, but Dad said I had to learn a trade first.
Finely crafted vessels were created with the most basic of tools. They were not designed with the aid of computers, nor even on paper. In fact, no drawings or calculations existed. They were developed from a half model carved by the builder using long experience and a keen eye. Boat building skills were learned quickly and on the job, with little ceremony and a minimum of instruction.
Like the planking, I said, oh geez, I said, that's pretty technical stuff. And he showed me one or two, and then okay, it was all right from there on. You had to cut the camber and the cork and seam in it and everything like that.
Bernard Wilson has been both a boat builder and a fisherman. With 18 substantial boats to his credit, the largest being the 70-foot Susan's Pride. He is the most experienced wooden boat builder in Tasmania today.
Yes, I've built my last boat. Yes, the memories. I've had her about 14-year-old, I'd say.
And what do you use it for?
Just to go out and catch a flathead or a cray and take the grandkids out. And every second year we go to the Wooden Boat Festival in Hobart to have a look at the boats and see what's about, and the grandkids love it. They stay on the boat. And that's better than Christmas, the young one said.
So that was Bernard 10 years ago. Now at a sprightly 88, he and Elizabeth have moved into a unit in Triabunna. He keeps himself busy at the men's shed and in his own shed. He began boat building at a young age.
I started when Dad was building dinghies in Stanley. I used to hold the dolly for him while he rove the nails up. And I was about probably 9 or 10. And then sort of went on from there.
Bernard's father, Dean Wilson, was also a prolific boat builder. He built 27 boats over 20 foot long. The largest was a 78-foot Cindy Hardy for Max Hardy of Stanley. I interviewed Dean for the book, Craft and Craftsman of Australian Fishing, and here I am interviewing his son 40 years later for this little video.
Dad promised he'd build me a boat as soon as I finished my apprenticeship. So it came down here and we built the Kalua, 28-footer, and I worked that for 2 years, I think, and I sold that and built a 46-footer, the Envy.
The what?
And that was the first boat I built on my own. I sold it to Bob Young at Dunalley, and he went scalloping in Melbourne with her, and then came back here and he sold it to Paul Morton. And she fished up at Flinders Island for a while till they wrecked her up there. Dad had moved to Smithton to build the Cindy, so I went up there and built a house for him. And then I built the Shirley while I was up there. I fished her for about 5-6 years, I suppose. And then I sold it to Rocky Dale, and he fished out of Dover for a fair while, and then his son took it, and then eventually was sold to a chap in Apollo Bay. And now she's back here as a sort of a derelict motor cruiser. After that, I built the Tara for Robbie Walker, and then we moved back to Triabunna, and what did I build after the Tara? The Relinga. That's right, the Relinga, and then the Conquista and the Boquin, and then we did the Breaksea.
Rolinga. That was for Wilson, was it?
Yeah, Peter Wilson, yeah.
Can you tell us about her? She had a very ball stern, didn't she?
Yeah, very full stern, and he wanted a pretty solid sort of boat because he was carting tin out with Port Davey, and he used to run it to Brisbane and Hobart, and she had to be a good carrying boat.
The conversation turned to the Bronwyn, which Bernard had built at Smithton years before.
Yeah, I built her for Dusty Lane, and he came to me and he said, I want about 45 foot boat built. He said, can you do it for me? And I said, yeah, I suppose I can. So I went back to Smithton and built that, but he had the, I think he had the keel and the stern post and a bit of other timber that he'd bought, and he said, I've got £7,500. He said, I've got 2 kids at high school, and he said, I've got to live. So he said, can you do it for that? So we set in and built it. I had a bloke called Mac Humphreys, he helped me build it up there, and we just built the hull and deck for that price, yeah. I think I had 4 months up there.
That was pretty quick then, wasn't it?
Yeah, we worked very hard on it.
So with using green timber, you'd have to allow a lot for shrinkage, wouldn't you?
No, celery doesn't shrink much, so it was we didn't have to allow much. But the problem later was that the keel and the stern post swelled and sort of pushed a bit of the planking away from the other timber. And he had a few problems there for a while till he stopped the leaks. Well, we didn't have any difficulties really. But, we could get the timber, that was readily available. We'd just ring Britons and they'd have it down there in pretty quick time when we wanted it. And just plan a bit ahead, and you could sort of organise things so things kept flowing pretty good. Yeah.
What's your favourite timber to work with?
Oh, Huon's the best, but it's sort of unavailable now. But celery's pretty good to work with. Yeah, it's a bit harder than celery, but Huon, but it's good timber.
You're still able to get it?
No, not now, no. I've sort of helped Mark Hilliard and Nellie, his partner, build that. I helped them set it up and put the ribs in, and I started the planking for them, and then he carried on. Then I put the bottom of the well in for him, and I built the wheelhouse on it. That was my contribution to it, yeah.
Nellie not only helped build the boat, but she helped fish it as well and raise a family. Quite a woman. You must have been pretty busy for a few years. There's a photo of you with 5 boats in the yard, isn't there?
Yeah.
What was going on at that time?
Yeah, I was building the Boquin then, I think. Mark was building the Gallifrey. Mick Drake was building the Thalassa, and the Conquista was still in the yard that I'd started for Martin Beck.
Bit of delay on
And
that,
then
was there?
Malcolm Ferguson was working with me, and he'd started to build the Carina up there as well.
Back in the good old days.
Yeah, and we were flat out. The Ada Hardy was a pretty big job. She was 60 foot. sort of modelled off the Breaksea, but Max got Tim Parker to alter a few things when he drew the plans up for it. We built that for Max, and there's quite a team of us on there. There was 5, I think, working on that all the time.
For how long?
We built her over 2 years, I think it was, because I did a bit of fishing in between. So.
Did you have trouble getting good keels?
No, not at that stage. No, Britons could cut up to 56 foot, I think, was the maximum in the shed up there. No, we didn't have any trouble then. We'd just order it and they'd tell us when it was ready. Yeah.
Did you have difficult owners?
A few. Yeah.
Without mentioning any names, can you mention any incidents?
Oh, no, just general sort of things, but some would want stuff put in special places and it wouldn't fit and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So you did a fair bit of fishing.
Yeah.
What
yeah.
did you prefer and why?
Oh, well, it was just a break from each, really. It was a pretty good life while I had it there. Yeah, do a bit of fishing and then come back to the work ashore on the boats.
One of the larger boats built by Bernard was a Breaksea for Les and Dennis McQueen.
When we went to see Bernard about building the Breaksea, he said, yeah, he can build it. And we went to Ag Bank and told him, what was going to do, and we wanted the money and that. And they said, who's going to build it? We said, Bernard Wilson. It was built on a handshake with Bernard.
Oh, that was a pretty long job, and we stretched her out. I suppose it was over 3 years. We'd do a bit and then I'd go fishing and Dennis and Les would go fishing and then we'd get back to it and do a bit and we got it done in the end. Yeah.
And Bernard's that type of bloke. Many's the weekend, he'd come back to work and I said, what are you doing back here, Bernard? And he said, I'm filling my time in, because people used to come and talk to him and I didn't care. I'm filling my time in. What's that say about Bernard Wilson? Yeah. If we didn't get a run a day, a plank a day right around the Breaksea, 60-footer, we were getting a bit slack. So he would had to do 54 planks, that's a month, 54 planks up the Breaksea. So it was a run a day and anyway.
Boat launchings were a big day in Little Triabunna.
When they was launching the fishing boats in town, it used to be a big event. They used to put them, they had a bit of a dirt ramp there and they had homemade trailers. Yeah, it was a special event at Triabunna.
Yeah, a fair few used to turn up, but you were too busy to take any notice of it, really. It was afterwards you sort of realised that how many had turned up. And,
but when we started building the bigger boats, like the Breaksea, the one we had, and the Susan's Pride, 60 to 65 footers, ours are 60, and we had to take him to the slipyard.
What about launchings? Is there any drama in launchings?
Oh, it's a bit of drama with the Breaksea.
We had it all set up, ready to come out, and that night it rained. What did Bernard say about 30 mil or whatever it was?
3 inches.
Yeah, and we got Elliot, the launching boats. Elliot's launched the big ones, but the smaller 40-footers were launched, like I said, in town on a homemade trailer. But when we launched the Breaksea, it was the first one, Elliot's, we had to get her out of the paddock. We built them in, all the boats were built in the paddock, because the weather was pretty good at Triabunna, building boats outside. Anyway, we got that much rain. Elliot tried to get the machinery in, a couple of, the low loader and a couple of cranes and all that sort of stuff. We all got bogged out. So it was all called a halt for that day, and the next day, Lionel, who was in charge of all the launchings, and he was a master he said we'll have to build a road. So they were really good to us at Triabunna. We had John Salmon on the bulldozer, and another trucking company there brought all the rocks in, and so we put a road under her to get her out the paddock. Because in that year, our first payment was in August, and this was in February or something. So we had to get out of the paddock to get finished building it, and
To pay the bank back.
yes, to pay the bank back. So it had to come out of the paddock. So they all got behind us, behind me, behind my brother. They all got behind me. Yeah, we can do this, and they did. But it cost us $10,000.
And then we got her onto the slip and everything was right then, but a terrible couple of days to get her out of the paddock.
What's the best boat you've built, do you think?
It's a toss-up between the Breaksea and the Boquin, I reckon, yeah.
And why is that?
Oh, just the way they were, you know, the timber and stuff that went into them and how they turned out, yeah.
So, what's your favourite boat?
Oh, I'd have to say the Shirley, she was my favourite little boat, yeah.
And why was that?
Oh, I don't know, it was just a nice little boat to work. It was a good boat and it earned me a fair bit of money.
Well, that's Susan's Pride. She was a big boat, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was 65 foot, yeah, and
That give you any particular difficulties?
no, she was just a big boat, heavy timber.
Yeah, I went up to Triabunna one day and I saw this boat out in the middle of a paddock, and on a closer inspection it was the Breaksea, and I took one look at it and said, now that's what I call a boat. And I think that was the start, because once that was imprinted in my brain, that was the start. And then of course I met Dennis and Bernard, and I'm positive that was the start of me building the Susan's Pride. Yeah, once I seen that, I was gone. I went up and saw Bernard 3 years prior to building the boat, and at the time I had the King's Pride and I sold that, and then went up and saw Bernard again, and at the time he was building the Relinga, and after he finished her, we started on the Susan's Pride, yeah. And yeah, I'll never forget, there was about 5 semi-trailer loads of timber came down, and it took us 3.5 years working on the boat, and that was nearly every day. Yeah, and it just goes together, you know, bit at a time, and yeah, he's very good, Bernard. You know, really nice fellow, and it was a good exercise really. It teaches you a lot of patience, and it was just good working with him. I just think he was a professional at what he did, you know. Always started, he was always the first one to start, last one to finish. Yeah, no, he's a real gentleman and a very good worker, yeah.
He led from the front.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'll never forget the plans. The plans were done in Sydney, and when they arrived, I took them up and Bernard opened them up and had a look at them, and he said, "That's not the boat." Rolled them back up, put them up on the shelf, and pulled the model out and built the boat. Yeah.
How did you calculate that she'd sit on her waterline when you put everything in her?
Oh, just sort of good luck and guess, I think.
That's amazing.
But if you made a model and it looked all right and seemed to work out all right.
But there'd be a lot of experience behind that, of course.
Yes, I suppose, and having a good eye for what you wanted, I think.
Bernard certainly knew what he was doing. In fact, he was very fastidious. He didn't like anyone, especially drilling holes in the boat, unless it was absolutely perfect, you know, like very particular, and no, not a lot of difficulties. I mean, he certainly knew what he was doing, and you know, and everyone else, they just did what he said, you know, because you knew he was right. Yeah.
So what about ribbing? Steaming all the ribs, can you explain
Yeah.
about that exercise?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that the timber's green when it comes down, and you steam it so you can bend it and get all the ribs in place and all that. And he was just marvellous at it. But the thing that really surprised me was it must have been 18 months or 2 years into the build, when all the ribs were done and finished. There was old bits and pieces of the ribs on the ground, still there in a big heap. And I looked at them one day, and they were real white, greyish white colour. Anyway, I picked one up and had a look at it, and it was as hard as steel. It really surprised me. You know, the steaming obviously affects the timber, and strong. It was just like picking up a piece of metal. It was that strong, you know. Yeah. So that was a bit of an eye opener. Yeah. So you can imagine how strong they are, you know, in a boat.
Did you have anything to do with the planking?
Yes, I did. Yeah, Bernard used to put the planks on and drill the holes in them, and I used to put the nails in, and there was two of us working on it, and I'd put the nails in from the outside and hold the hammer, or be on the inside and bend them over so they were nice and tight. And I think from memory there was something like 6,000 nails in the hull. Yeah. And they'd only do from memory maybe 3 to 4 planks a day, maybe. Yeah, because they were 50 mil thick, big bits of timber. It was a big job. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that number's about right. From memory, I just in the back of my mind, I think there's about. I know it was a lot of nails, and from memory, I was working on that for about at least 6 weeks. Yeah, but it took 3.5 years altogether. One day after, you'd go up and you'd work all day, and you could sort of hardly see where you've been, and that's why I said you learn a lot of patience. But you know, I learned a lot off Bernard, really, especially with patience, because I was a bit anxious sort of bloke. You know, I like to get in and get it done and get it finished, but you couldn't do that because everything you did had to be, you know, slow and sure, and it had to be absolutely right. Yeah. It was a big job to get it from his backyard to where they launched the boat, and Elliott's came up with this massive trailer and cranes and lifted it up and got it out there, and it's a big job though. Yeah, big job.
Caulking the seams with caulking cotton or oakum was the time-honoured method of making planking watertight. In the early 1980s, there was a trend towards splining seams with timber, which made for a tighter hull and superior to caulking. The Ada Hardy, built in the mid-80s, was the first boat that Bernard splined.
When Max came down, he said just spline the top sides. Yeah. And then the thalasser was run ashore on the ocean beach, I think it was. Yes. And Max went and had a look at her on the beach, and he came back and he said, spline the Ada right down. He said, yes. I think the first time I saw it was Mick Drake was building a yacht for Tim Chesterman. They splined that. And then as Dennis said, we put splines in the Breaksey's bulwarks. We did that, and it turned out real good, and then we've done it ever since. When we started it, I just made a guide up for my electric plane, and I'd run that along the edge of the planking and well, I'd get the right bevel on it. And when we put the splines in, we'd just fill the seam with glue and then tap the spline in, and that did the job.
And the spline would be what sort of timber?
It's the same as the hull, yeah.
Possibly celery.
Celery or hewn, whatever the hull was, yeah, yep.
And what about fastenings? Did they change over the years?
No, we always use copper fastenings, yeah, yep.
What's better, roving or clenching?
I reckon clinching's the strongest, yeah. But it just takes forever to rove one, yeah.
Stronger and quicker.
Yeah, yep. But if it's clinched properly, you'd pull the head off the nail before you'd pull it out, yeah.
What do you think of it all looking back?
Oh, I'd do it all again, I think, yeah.
So, Bernard, what do you think of the future?
It's a dying art, I think. There won't be many more built, I don't think.
You must have got a lot of satisfaction out of it.
Oh, it was good when you see them in the water and working, and they all turned out pretty good. Yeah.
It is a wonderful testament to Bernard's ability, forethought and experience that he built 20 boats, handling heavy timber and machinery, using power tools, fished the coast extensively in all weathers, and had no accidents. It was all just another day at the office. Have you had any bad frights or close shaves?
No, I don't think so.
You haven't cut anything or broken anything?
No. Oh, I broke a gearbox once, that's about all. Yeah, in the boat, yeah.
You've had a dream run.
Yeah, but it's been good.
When you can build a boat on a handshake, that tells something about the person, right?
When Bernard finally reaches the boat builder's heaven, a place stacked high with great lengths of dry timber free of heart and sap, and where the clients don't interfere, he will be long remembered for his staunch and capable vessels, which will still be earning their living off the wild coasts of old Tasmania. And the boat builder's arts and traditions will continue to be celebrated in the Australian Wooden Boat Festival held in Hobart every 2nd February.